almost didn't turn the camera on. I've been sitting here. I don't know, 20 minutes? Maybe more. Just staring at that little red light like it's going to. I don't know, judge me or something. Which is ridiculous, I know. It's a camera. It's not a person. But it feels like one. It feels like if I say this out loud, like really say it, something shifts. Something locks into place that I can't undo. And I've avoided that. For a long time. 15 years, actually. I've been living with something for 15 years that I have never said out loud. Not to my therapist. Not to my sister. Not even in a journal, which is saying something because I've written a lot of things down over the years. But not this. Never this. And it's not just because I'm ashamed, although I am. I am ashamed. I don't want to pretend I'm not. But that's not the whole reason. The real reason is, if I say it clearly, if I say exactly what I did without softening it or adjusting it, then I can't hide from it anymore. I can't keep doing that thing where I kind of know what happened but also don't look directly at it. Like when you avoid mirrors in bad lighting. I've been doing that. Avoiding it. Letting it stay blurry. And I can't anymore. I can't. Because here's the worst part, and this is the part that, it makes me feel sick, honestly, she still doesn't know. She thinks she knows. She thinks she understands why her life kind of fell apart that year. But she doesn't. Not really. Not the full version. Not the part that includes me. And some days. I convince myself that's kindness. That I spared her something. That telling her would have just hurt her more. But other days, most days, if I'm being honest, it feels like the most cowardly thing I've ever done. And I've done some cowardly things. Okay. I need to start somewhere. Her name is, no, I'm not going to use her real name. I can't. Not yet. I'm going to call her Dana. That feels safer. Even saying that makes my chest feel tight. Because there's a part of me that thinks she could see this. That she could somehow find it and, I don't know, recognize herself in it. And I'm not ready for that. I don't think I'll ever be ready for that. Dana and I met in 2003. We were both working at this insurance company in Ohio. Nothing special. Just rows of cubicles, stale coffee that somehow always tasted burned no matter who made it, those awful fluorescent lights that make everyone look slightly unwell. I had just gotten out of a relationship. 3 years. It ended quietly, which somehow made it worse. And she had just moved in from out of state. Didn't really know anyone yet. And we just clicked. Like immediately. You know that kind of friendship where you're just talking, and suddenly it's midnight and you don't even remember how the conversation started? That was us. Constantly. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, didn't matter. We'd sit on the phone for hours. She had this really dry sense of humor. Like, if you didn't know her, you'd miss it. Completely. She'd say something under her breath and you'd either catch it or you wouldn't. And I loved that I caught it. I loved that I was one of her people. We were best friends within 6 months. Real best friends. Not just co-workers who grab lunch. She was in my apartment all the time. We met each other's families. Holidays, birthdays, random Sundays, she was just there. And I need to say this part clearly, because it matters later. I didn't admit it back then. I wouldn't have. But it was there. I was jealous of her. Not constantly. Not in some dramatic, obvious way. But, it was there. Underneath things. She was prettier than me. I hate even saying that out loud because it sounds so small. But I was 30. It mattered more than I wanted it to. She had this effortless way about her. Men noticed her. She didn't try. She didn't need to. And me? I was the funny one. The loud one. The one people liked, but not like that. And I told myself I was fine with that. I really believed I was fine with that. But looking back now, I don't think I was. Not completely. And that matters. That feeling, it doesn't just disappear. It waits. Around 2006, she started dating someone. Marcus. And I remember the first time I met him thinking, he's fine. Like, objectively fine. Good job, decent looking, polite, attentive. There was nothing obviously wrong with him. But something about him bothered me. Just a little. Not enough to say anything outright. Just enough that I told myself, pay attention. And I framed it as intuition. I told myself I was being protective. That I was just looking out for her. But now I'm not so sure that's what it was. Because Marcus liked me. Not in a way I could point to and say, this is inappropriate. Nothing like that. But he laughed at my jokes. He leaned into conversations with me. When the three of us were out, he'd include me in little side comments, like we had our own thread running underneath everything. And Dana noticed. But she didn't get weird about it. That's the thing. She trusted me. Completely. She used to say, he loves you. You know that, right? He thinks you're hilarious. And I'd laugh it off. I'd say something like, well, obviously, I'm very charming. But inside, I loved hearing that. I loved it more than I should have. And I didn't stop it. I didn't step back. I stayed right there, right at the edge of something I knew I shouldn't be near. And I told myself that was okay. That as long as I didn't cross a line. I wasn't doing anything wrong. But that's the thing I didn't understand then. Or maybe I did understand it, and I just ignored it. Because the truth is, I knew exactly where that line was. And I didn't cross it. But I also didn't move away from it. I stayed there. On purpose. And that's where everything started to shift in a way I didn't want to see at the time. Because what I haven't said yet, what I didn't even fully admit to myself then, is this. I was already starting to fall for him. And I think, deep down, I knew exactly what that meant. I just didn't realize how far I was willing to go before I finally admitted it. And what happened next? I still replay it sometimes, like if I had said one different sentence, maybe none of this would have happened. I didn't admit it right away. That's the first thing. I didn't wake up one morning and think, oh, I have feelings for my best friend's boyfriend. It wasn't like that. It was slower. Quieter. The kind of thing you can pretend isn't happening if you just don't look at it too closely. And I was very good at not looking too closely. Marcus and Dana dated for about a year and a half. And somewhere in that time, Marcus and we built something separate. Not official. Not labeled. But it was there. We'd get coffee sometimes. Just the two of us. And that sounds bad when I say it now, but at the time, it didn't feel like it. Because Dana knew. That's the part one always used to justify it. She knew. She encouraged it, even. She wasn't a jealous person. Not at all. If anything, she liked that the two people she cared about got along. She used to say it made things easier. Smoother. And I let that be my excuse. We'd text, too. Nothing explicitly wrong. That's the frustrating part. If someone had looked at the messages, they probably would have said, this is fine. This is friendly. But there was something underneath it. A tone. A rhythm. A way the conversations lingered just a little too long. A way I would notice when he hadn't texted for a while. And I knew. That's the part that's hard to admit. I knew where the line was. And I stayed right up against it. Not over it. Never over it, at least not in a way I could point to and say, that's the moment. But right there. Close enough that if I leaned even slightly. And I told myself that counted. That restraint counted. Like I deserved credit for not doing the worst thing, while I was still doing something that wasn't right. I kept telling myself, it's fine. You're not doing anything. But I was. I was inserting myself into their relationship in ways that were subtle enough to ignore but real enough to matter. I'd suggest the three of us hang out. I'd make sure I was available when she wasn't. I'd respond quickly when he texted. I'd prioritize it. And the truth is, I liked the way he saw me. I liked being the funny one in his eyes. The easy one. The one who didn't come with expectations or history or complications. And I didn't stop. I didn't take a step back and say, this is getting too close. I leaned in. Slowly. Carefully. But deliberately. And I know, part of me believed I could stay in that space forever. That I could have this, almost thing without it ever becoming a real thing. Without consequences. That was the story I told myself. But stories like that, they don't hold. Then, in late 2007, they broke up. And I remember the moment Dana told me. We were sitting on her couch. She had that look, you know, the one where someone's trying to be okay but they're not even close. And I did everything right. On the surface, I mean. I brought wine. I sat with her. I let her cry. I said all the things you're supposed to say. You deserve better. It's going to be okay. You'll get through this. I was a good friend. I looked like a good friend. But inside, something else was happening. And I hate this part. I really do. But it's true. I felt relief. Not overwhelming, not obvious, but there. A quiet kind of opening. Like a door had unlocked somewhere in the back of my mind. And the second I felt it, I buried it. Immediately. I didn't examine it. I didn't let myself sit with it. Because if I had, I would have had to admit what it meant. So I didn't. I just kept playing my role. Supportive. Loyal. Present. Even while something in me had already shifted. 3 months later, Marcus texted me. And I remember seeing his name on my phone and pausing. Just for a second. Because I knew, again, I knew, this mattered. This was one of those moments where you make a choice, even if it feels small at the time. And I knew what the right choice was. I should have told Dana. Immediately. Hey, he reached out. That's it. Simple. Honest. Clean. That's what a good friend does. That's what I should have done. But I didn't. I stared at the message. I thought about it. I told myself it would be rude not to respond. That it wasn't a big deal. That it was probably innocent. And then I texted back. And that was the moment. Not the biggest moment. Not the one I think about the most. But it was a turning point. Because once I responded, we started talking again. Privately. No one else included. Just us. And it escalated faster than I expected. Or, no. That's not true. It escalated exactly the way I should have expected. Because we were already there. Emotionally. We had been for months, maybe longer. We just hadn't said it out loud. And now there was nothing stopping it. At least, that's what I told myself. We were together, for lack of a better word, for about 2 months before I told Dana. 2 months. And I've rewritten that timeline in my head so many times. I've tried to make it shorter. I've tried to make it sound less deliberate. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment. I told myself she was still healing and I didn't want to hurt her more. I told myself I needed to be sure about Marcus before I said anything. All of that sounds reasonable, right? It sounds like someone trying to be thoughtful. Careful. But it's not the truth. The truth is, I didn't want to give it up. I didn't want the reality of telling her to force a decision. Because I knew, once she knew, things would change. I wouldn't get to just exist in that space anymore. I'd have to choose. And I didn't want to choose. So I waited. I let myself have both things for as long as I could. Her trust, and him. And I knew that's what I was doing. I knew it the entire time. And the longer I waited, the harder it became to tell her. Not because I didn't know how, but because every day I didn't say it made it worse. Heavier. More real. And I kept thinking, tomorrow. I'll tell her tomorrow. Over and over. Until suddenly it had been 2 months. And by then, I wasn't just afraid of hurting her. I was afraid of what she would see when she looked at me. Because I knew, I wouldn't be able to explain it in a way that made me look like a good person. And I cared about that. I cared about that more than I cared about being honest. When I finally did tell her. No, actually, I need to stop there. Because the way that moment unfolded, the look on her face, the way she reacted, it wasn't what I expected. Not at all. And I didn't realize it then, but that conversation? That was the moment I lost her. Not later. Not slowly over time. Right there. I just didn't understand it yet. And what she said next, it still sits with me in a way I can't fully explain. I told her on a Sunday. I remember that part so clearly, it's almost uncomfortable how clear it is. Like my brain decided, this you're going to keep forever. It was raining. Not heavy, just that steady kind that makes everything feel quieter than it actually is. I was sitting at her kitchen table, and I had already rehearsed it in my head at least. I don't know, 20 times on the drive over. And none of those rehearsals mattered once I was actually sitting there. Because suddenly it felt real. Like I couldn't hide behind my own explanations anymore. I remember my hands were cold. Which is weird because it wasn't cold in her apartment. But I kept rubbing them together under the table like that would. I don't know, steady me. And then I just said it. Not perfectly. Not smoothly. I said, Dana, I need to tell you something, and it's bad, and I'm sorry before I even say it. And the second the words left my mouth, her face changed. It was subtle. If you didn't know her, you might not even notice it. But I did. I knew her. She knew. Not the details, not everything, but on some level, she knew. And I remember thinking, oh, this is worse than I thought. Because there's something about that moment, when someone realizes they were right to trust their instincts, that it lands differently. She didn't interrupt me. She didn't ask questions right away. She just sat there, looking at me. So I said it. I told her Marcus and I had been seeing each other. I said it quickly. Like ripping something off before I could stop myself. And then there was this pause. And I kept waiting for something. Anger. Shock. Anything. But she didn't react the way I expected. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked at me for a second and then said, very calmly, how long? And that question, it felt heavier than anything else she could have said. Because there was no way to soften that answer. No way to make it sound better than it was. And I hesitated. Just for a second. Which? I hate admitting that, but I did. I hesitated because even in that moment, I was still thinking about how I sounded. And then I told her. 2 months. And she nodded. Just nodded. And said, okay. That was it. No raised voice. No dramatic reaction. She stood up, walked to the counter, and refilled her coffee like we were in the middle of a normal conversation. And I remember sitting there thinking, this isn't right. Because it didn't feel like a reaction. It felt like something shutting down. Something closing. And I didn't understand it then. I really didn't. I thought maybe she was processing. Maybe it would hit her later. Maybe she'd call me that night, angry, or upset, or something. But that moment, that quiet, flat, okay, that was the beginning of the end. I just didn't see it yet. She didn't end the friendship that day. That's the part that makes it even more confusing when I think back on it. She didn't say, "We're done." She didn't ask me to leave. She didn't tell me never to come back. We finished our coffee. We talked about normal things. Work. Some show she'd been watching. Completely surface level. And I played along. Like if I just acted normal, it would somehow stay normal. But underneath it, something had shifted so far that there was no going back. You could feel it. Like pressing on a bruise. Everything looked the same, but the second you touched it, you knew it wasn't. Over the next few months, it just faded. That's the only word I have for it. No big fight. No dramatic ending. She stopped calling as much. I called less, too, if I'm being honest. Because every time I thought about reaching out, there was this heaviness. Like I knew the conversation wouldn't feel the way it used to. And I didn't want to feel that. So I avoided it. Which, looking back, that's its own kind of choice, isn't it? Not fighting for something is still a decision. By the end of 2008, we just weren't really in each other's lives anymore. And that's how it ended. Not with a crash. Just quiet. And here's the part that stayed with me for 15 years. The version of the story she believes. She thinks Marcus pursued me. She thinks I was weak. That I made a bad decision in a complicated situation. That's the story she has. And it's not completely wrong. But it's not the whole story. Not even close. And I let her believe that. I let her carry that version because it was easier for me. Because it made me look like someone who slipped. Not someone who planned. Not someone who helped something break. What I never told her, what I've never told anyone, is that it wasn't just the timing I controlled. There was a moment. And I think about it more than any other moment in this entire story. More than telling her. More than the 2 months. More than anything. It was a night, maybe 8 months before they broke up. Marcus called me. And that in itself wasn't unusual. We talked sometimes. But this time, he was upset. They had fought. A real fight. Not just something small. And he was venting. And I remember exactly where I was. I was sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot. Engine off. Bags in the passenger seat. I hadn't even started driving yet. And I just listened. He was frustrated. Saying things like, "I don't know if we want the same things anymore, and maybe we're just not right." And I remember this very specific thought crossing my mind. Clear. Not emotional. Not confused. Clear. This is my moment. I knew it. I knew that what I said next mattered. That I had influence in that moment. And I had 2 choices. I could have said, "You should talk to her. She loves you. This is worth working through." That's what a good friend would have said. That's what she deserved. But I didn't say that. I said, it's okay to admit when something isn't working. And that's it. That's all I said. It doesn't even sound that bad when you hear it. It sounds neutral. Reasonable, even. But I knew what I was doing. I knew exactly what I was doing. I wasn't just listening. I was nudging. Gently. Subtly. But deliberately. And that moment, that sentence. That was the first real crack. Not the only reason they ended. I'm not going to pretend I had that much power. But I helped. I helped plant something. And then I watched it grow. And I never told her. Not then. Not ever. And here's the part that still, I don't know, unsettles me the most. After everything, after losing her, after all of this, Marcus and I didn't even last. Not really. We dated officially for about 4 months. 4 months. And then it just fizzled. No big betrayal. No dramatic ending. He got a job in another state. We tried long distance for a little while, and then we didn't. And that was it. I haven't spoken to him in over a decade. So whatever I thought I was risking everything for, it wasn't even real. Or at least, it wasn't real enough. And I didn't realize it then, but that's the part that should have broken something open in me. That should have been the moment where I called Dana and told her everything. Everything. But I didn't. And the reason I didn't, it's worse than just being scared of her reaction. It's something else. Something I didn't fully understand until much later. And once I did, I couldn't unsee it. I told myself, for a long time, that I didn't call her because I was afraid of how she'd react. That's the version that sounds understandable, right? Like, of course you'd be scared. Of course you wouldn't want to face that. But that's not really it. Or, it's part of it, but it's not the core of it. The truth is, I wasn't just scared of her being angry. I wasn't even scared of her hating me. I think, on some level, I already assumed that was fair. What I was actually scared of was what would happen to me, internally, if I said it out loud. If I told her the full truth. Because up until that point, I still had this version of the story I could live with. You know? I could say, I made a mistake. I fell into something. It was complicated. All those words that soften things just enough that you can still look at yourself and think, I'm not a bad person. I just messed up. But if I told her about the parking lot, if I told her that I saw an opening and I took it, that I didn't just fall into something, I leaned into it, then that version disappears. And I didn't want to lose that version of myself. I didn't want to become the person who did something calculated. Something intentional. Something that hurt someone who trusted me. So I didn't call. Not that week. Not the next month. Not the next year. I let time do what time does. I let it stretch things out, soften edges, blur details. I let it turn something sharp into something manageable. And every day I didn't say it made it easier not to. Until eventually, it felt like there was no point. Like, well, it's been this long. Why bring it up now? Which? I know how that sounds. I do. It sounds like an excuse. It was an excuse. I see her sometimes. Not in person. Just online. You know how that goes. Social media. People you used to know still existing somewhere in your peripheral vision. She got married. A few years after everything, I think. Maybe 4 or 5. I remember when I first saw the pictures. I had this weird reaction. Part of me was genuinely happy for her. Like, really. She deserved that. She deserved someone who chose her without complication. But another part of me, this quieter, less comfortable part, felt something else. Relief. And I hate admitting that. Relief that she was okay. That her life didn't collapse because of what happened. That whatever I did didn't permanently damage her. Because if she's fine, then maybe I'm not as bad as I think I am. Do you hear that? Even now, I'm still doing it. Still trying to soften it. Still trying to make it easier to live with. And the thing is, I don't actually know if she's fine. I see pictures. Smiling, kids, holidays, all of that. But pictures don't tell you everything. I don't know what that year did to her. I don't know how long it took her to trust someone again. I don't know if she ever sat somewhere, the way I'm sitting now, and thought about me and tried to make sense of it. I don't know. And I think not knowing has been part of how I've managed to live with it. Because as long as it's unclear, I can fill in the blanks in a way that makes it easier. After everything with Dana and Marcus, I went through this stretch, maybe 3 years, give or take, where I just buried myself in work. 2009 to maybe 2012. I had a good job by then. I was moving up, getting more responsibility, more recognition. And I leaned into that hard. I told myself that's who I was now. I'm focused. I'm driven. I'm career-oriented. All of those things were true, but they were also convenient. Because being busy meant I didn't have to sit still long enough to really think about what happened. I didn't go to therapy. Not then. I didn't talk about it with anyone. I just kept moving. Forward, forward, forward. Because forward felt safer than looking back. And for a while, that worked. Or at least, it felt like it worked. Then I got into another relationship. A serious one. We were together for 4 years. And it was good. In a lot of ways, it was really good. Stable. Healthy, at least on the surface. We talked about getting engaged. We looked at rings once. Just casually, but still. And then it ended. And it ended because of me. I'm not going to get into all of that, it's its own story, honestly, but I will say this. When it ended, I finally went to therapy. And I remember sitting there, maybe, 3rd or 4th session, explaining things. Not even talking about Dana yet, just talking about patterns, relationships, how things tend to go for me. And my therapist said something that, it didn't feel dramatic in the moment, but it stayed with me. She said, it sounds like you have a pattern of wanting something, and then finding a way to burn it down once you get it. And I laughed. At first. Not because it was funny, but because it was uncomfortable. And I said, that's not what I do. But then I went home. And I kept thinking about it. 4 days. Weeks. Because the more I thought about it, the more it started to feel true. Not just in that relationship. Not just with Marcus. But further back. Like this wasn't an isolated thing. Like it was a pattern. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. And that's when Dana came back into focus in a different way. Not just as this isolated mistake, but as part of something bigger. Part of a story I'd been telling myself for a long time about who I am, what I deserve, how relationships work. And I started asking myself questions I hadn't asked before. Like, did I actually want Marcus? Or did I want what Marcus represented? Did I want him, or did I want to be chosen over her? Did I want to build something, or did I just want to take something? And I don't like my answers to those questions. I really don't. Because they point to something in me that feels ugly. And real. I've thought about reaching out to her. More times than I can count. I've written emails. Long ones. Like pages and pages, trying to explain everything. Trying to say it in a way that feels honest but not overwhelming. And every single time, I get stuck in the same place. The parking lot. That moment. Because how do you explain that? How do you say, I saw an opportunity to weaken your relationship, and I took it, in a way that doesn't just destroy whatever version of the past she's made peace with? And then I start questioning my motives. Why do I want to tell her? Is it for her, or is it for me? Because if it's for me, if it's about me wanting forgiveness, or relief, or closure, then that's not fair to her. That's me asking her to carry something for me. And she doesn't owe me that. But if it's about her right to know the full story, then maybe I should. Except, what if knowing doesn't help her? What if it just reopens something she's already healed from? What if the kindest thing I can do now is stay quiet? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And the fact that I still don't know, 15 years later. That's that's the part that gets to me. Because I've built a life since then. People in my life now, they think they know me. My sister, especially. She thinks I'm a good person. She'd be horrified if she saw this. Not because she's judgmental, but because this doesn't match the version of me she holds in her head. And I've worked hard to maintain that version. Carefully. Quietly. But living in that gap, the gap between who people think you are and who you know you've been. It's exhausting. It's like carrying something heavy all the time and pretending your hands are empty. And I'm tired. I'm really tired of carrying it. That's why I'm here. I think. Not for forgiveness. Not for sympathy. Just to say it. To stop editing it in my own head. To stop telling the softer version. Because the full version is this. I planted doubt in my best friend's relationship because I wanted her boyfriend. I stayed close to that line on purpose. I waited months to tell her the truth because I didn't want to lose what I had. And when I had the chance to come clean, completely, honestly, I chose not to. Because it was easier for me. That's it. That's the truth. But even that isn't the part that haunts me the most. Which? I know that sounds strange, after everything I've said. But there's something smaller. A moment that seems insignificant on the surface. And somehow, it's the one I come back to over and over again. Because it says something about me that I don't know how to excuse. And I didn't even realize how bad it was, until much later. It wasn't a big moment. That's the thing that makes it worse, I think. If it had been dramatic, if there had been shouting or something obvious to point at, maybe I could understand it better. Maybe I could say, that was the worst part. But it wasn't. It was quiet. Almost forgettable, if you weren't paying attention. A few weeks after I told her, before everything had completely faded out, she called me one night. And I almost didn't answer. I remember looking at my phone and just hesitating. Because by then, every interaction felt off. Like we were both pretending something hadn't changed when it very clearly had. But I picked up. And she sounded small. That's the only way I can describe it. Not weak, she wasn't weak, but diminished. Like she was trying to hold herself together and it was taking effort. She said she missed him. Marcus. And I remember just sitting there, holding the phone, staring at nothing, feeling this tightness in my chest. Because I knew I didn't have the right to comfort her about him. Not anymore. Maybe I never did. But she didn't see it that way. To her, I was still me. Her best friend. The person she trusted. And then she asked me something. She said, "Do you think I did something wrong? Like, was there something I could have done differently?" And I swear to you, time just slowed down. Because that question, it landed in a place I had been avoiding. It wasn't about Marcus, really. Not entirely. It was about her trying to make sense of something painful. Trying to find a reason. A way to understand why it ended. And I had the answer. Not the full answer, but part of it. A part that mattered. And I had a choice. Again. I could have said, "No, you didn't do anything wrong," but I did. I could have told her. Right there. It would have been awful. It would have hurt her. It would have changed everything, again. But it would have been honest. And she deserved that. Instead. I said, "No. No, you were a great girlfriend. This isn't about anything you did wrong. And listen, that's true. Technically, that's true. She didn't do anything wrong. But it wasn't the whole truth. Not even close. Because what I didn't say, the part one kept to myself, even as she was asking me directly, even as she was vulnerable and open and trusting, was this. I did something wrong. Before all of this. I helped create this outcome. And I'm not telling you because I don't want to face what that makes me. I didn't say that. I chose the version that made me look like a good friend. I gave her comfort, without giving her truth. And she believed me. She actually sounded relieved. She said, I needed to hear that. And then, this is the part that stays with me in this, very specific, almost unbearable way. She said, you're the best. And I said, yeah. Of course. Like it was normal. Like it was deserved. And in that moment, both things were true. I was the best, in her eyes. And I was also, the worst. And I let her keep believing one version. Because it was easier. I think about that call more than anything else. More than the parking lot. More than telling her. Because that was a moment where I could have corrected something. Not fixed it. Not undone it. But told the truth. And I didn't. And there's something about that, about being given the opportunity to be honest and choosing not to be, that feels worse than the original mistake. Because by then, I knew exactly what I was doing. There was no confusion left. No denial. Just a choice. After that, things faded completely. We stopped calling. Stopped texting. Birthdays passed without messages. Holidays too. And at some point, it became official without anyone saying it out loud. We weren't in each other's lives anymore. And I let that happen. I didn't fight for it. I didn't try to fix it. Because fixing it would have required honesty. And I wasn't ready for that. Years passed. And life, it just kept moving. I built a career. I dated. I made new friends. I became, on the surface, a person who had things together. And for a while, I actually believed that version of myself. Or at least, I didn't question it too much. But every now and then, something would bring her back. A song. A place. A random memory. The way she used to laugh, this kind of surprised laugh, like she didn't expect to find something funny and then suddenly did. The way she showed up for people. Like when my dad died. I haven't talked about that yet, but she was there. She didn't say much. She didn't try to fix anything. She just stood next to me in the parking lot after the funeral and held my hand. For a long time. Long enough that it stopped feeling like time. And I remember thinking, this is what it means to be loved by a friend. That kind of steady, quiet presence. And I broke that. I took that and I damaged it. And I didn't even have the courage to fully admit how. I'm 45 now. And it's strange, the things that stay with you. You'd think something like this would fade, or at least, soften. But it hasn't. If anything, it's gotten clearer. Less defensible. There was a time when I would have argued with parts of this story. When I would have said, it's more complicated than that, or I wasn't the only one responsible, or people make mistakes. And all of that is technically true. But it doesn't cancel anything out. It doesn't undo what I did. And I don't feel the need to defend myself anymore. Not in the way I used to. Because defending it, that was just another way of avoiding it. I still think about reaching out. I do. Especially on days where it feels heavier than usual. I'll open my email, start typing, stop, delete it. Over and over. Because I keep coming back to the same question. What right do I have to re-enter her life now? After all this time? And more importantly, what right do I have to tell her something that might hurt her, just so I can feel better? Because I don't think that's fair. But then the other side of it is. What right did I have to keep the truth from her in the first place? And if I believe she deserved to know then, doesn't she still deserve to know now? I don't know which of those is more important. I really don't. I wish I could say there's a clean answer. That there's some clear moral conclusion I've come to. But there isn't. There's just this, ongoing tension. Between wanting to take responsibility, and not wanting to cause more damage. Between honesty, and impact. And I don't know how to resolve that. I'm still sitting in it. Still, figuring it out. And I think that's part of why I'm doing this. Because even if I don't know what to do about her, I can at least stop lying to myself about what happened. I can stop pretending it was smaller than it was. I can say it, fully, without editing it down. And maybe that matters. Maybe that's a start. But there's one more thing. One last piece of this that I haven't said yet. And it's not about Dana. Not really. It's about me. About something I realized much later, something that made everything feel a little more unsettling. Because it means this wasn't just a one-time thing. It means it might be part of who I am in a way I haven't fully faced. And once I say that out loud, I don't know if I'll be able to look at myself the same way again. It took me a long time to see it. And I mean really see it, not just brush up against the idea and then move on, but actually sit with it long enough that it starts to feel uncomfortable. Like you can't unknow it once it clicks. Because for years, I treated what happened with Dana like it was contained. Like it was this one situation where I made a series of bad decisions, and yeah, it was ugly, but it was also isolated. That's the word I used. Isolated. Like it didn't say anything bigger about me. And I held on to that idea pretty tightly. Because as long as it was isolated, I could keep the rest of my identity intact. I could say, that's not who I am. That was just something I did. But after therapy, after that comment about patterns, about wanting something and then burning it down, I started looking at things differently. And I didn't like what I saw. Because when I really went back and looked, honestly, not defensively, there were other moments. Not exactly like Dana. Not as consequential. But similar in shape. Moments where I leaned into something I shouldn't have. Moments where I wanted something that wasn't mine to want. Moments where, instead of stepping back, I stepped closer. And then, this is the part that's hard to explain, I'd get it, or get close to getting it, and something would shift. The excitement would change. The urgency would fade. And then I'd either lose interest, or I'd find a way to make it fall apart. Not always dramatically. Sometimes quietly. Sometimes in ways that looked almost reasonable from the outside. But the pattern was there. And once I saw it, I couldn't pretend I didn't. I'm pretty sure, there's a part of me that doesn't believe I deserve stable, uncomplicated things. That's not something I would have said 10 years ago. Or even 5. But now, it feels true. Like there's this underlying assumption that if something is good and steady and real, it won't last. Or it shouldn't last. Or I'll ruin it eventually, so I might as well get there first. And I hate that. I hate that there's a version of me that operates like that. Because it means what happened with Dana wasn't just about her. It wasn't just about Marcus. It was about me. About how I move through relationships. About what I do when I feel insecure. Or overlooked. Or not chosen. Because that's really what it comes back to, I think. Being chosen. I wasn't the one people chose like that. Not in the way she was. And instead of dealing with that, instead of sitting with it, understanding it, working through it, I found a way to flip it. To be the one who gets chosen, even if it means taking something from someone else. Even if that someone else is the person who trusts me the most. And saying that out loud. I don't know, it makes me feel. I was going to say, awful, but it's more than that. It makes me feel exposed. Like I can't hide behind the softer version anymore. I don't have a clean ending to this. I wish I did. I wish I could say, I reached out to her and we talked and there was closure, or I've forgiven myself and moved on, or something like that. But that's not true. I haven't reached out. I haven't resolved it. And I don't think I've fully forgiven myself. I've just gotten more honest about it. Which is something, I guess. I still think about her. Probably more than she thinks about me, if she thinks about me at all. And it's not even always about what I did. Sometimes it's just her. The way she used to laugh, that surprised kind of laugh, like something caught her off guard in the best way. The way she showed up for people without making a big deal out of it. The way she sat with me after my dad's funeral and didn't try to fix anything, didn't say anything unnecessary, just held my hand. That kind of presence, it's rare. And I had it. And I lost it. And I know exactly why. There's a part of me that still wants to protect the version of myself that people see. My sister, especially. She thinks I'm steady. Loyal. The kind of person who wouldn't do something like this. And I've let her believe that. I've built a life that supports that image. But it's not the whole truth. And living with that gap, between who you are and who people think you are, it does something to you. It makes everything feel a little performative. Like you're always slightly aware of the role you're playing. And I've been playing that role for a long time. That's why this matters to me. Not because I expect anything to come from it. Not because I think this fixes anything. But because it's the first time I've said it, completely. No edits. No softening. No leaving pieces out. Just. I planted doubt in my best friend's relationship because I wanted her boyfriend. I stayed close to that situation on purpose. I waited to tell her because I didn't want to lose what I had. And when I had the chance to tell her the full truth, I chose not to. Because it was easier for me. That's the full version. That's the part she never got. If she ever sees this. And I don't know if that would be good or terrible, I honestly don't. I just want to say this, clearly. The story you have, it isn't wrong. But it isn't complete. And you deserved a complete story. You deserved someone who loved you enough to be honest with you, even when it made them look terrible. And I didn't do that. And I'm sorry. Not in a way that asks for anything back. Not in a way that expects forgiveness. Just, in the way that acknowledges what happened. And to anyone watching this, I don't have a lesson. I really don't. I'm not going to wrap this up with something neat like, be honest, or don't betray people, because those things are obvious. And knowing them doesn't always stop you from doing the wrong thing. What I will say is this. Keeping something like this to yourself, it changes how you see yourself. Because when you know there are parts of you that nobody else has really seen, parts you've hidden, even from the people closest to you, it creates this distance. You start to feel like you're performing your own life a little bit. Like there's the version of you people know, and then there's the version of you that's holding something back. And that gap, it's heavy. It really is. I'm tired of carrying it. That's the simplest way to say it. I'm tired of editing this story in my own head. I'm tired of pretending it was smaller than it was. I'm tired of protecting a version of myself that isn't fully true. So this is it. This is the unedited version. Messy. Uncomfortable. Incomplete. But real. I don't know what I'm going to feel after this. Relief, maybe. Or regret. Probably both. I'll probably lie awake tonight replaying everything I said, wondering if I should have said it differently, or not at all. But at least it's said. At least it exists outside of my head now. And maybe that matters. Even if nothing else changes. I'm going to go make some coffee. Try to do something normal after this. And tomorrow. I don't know. I'll figure out tomorrow when it gets here. But tonight. Tonight I'm sitting with it. All of it. And for the first time in 15 years. I'm not looking away. And that should feel like closure. But it doesn't. Not even close.